Hey there, everyone. Welcome to the Reel Film Chronicles podcast, episode 3. As always, I'm Nathan.
And I'm Brian.
And we're here today to go over the film Greenland, which came out recently on Amazon Prime.
And it came out in theaters in pretty limited countries and theater counts last July, I think of July 2020.
Oh, did it?
It was probably Wikipedia I was reading this on. It came out in like Belgium, for instance. In some of the more safe countries, I guess, it did get a limited theatrical release. And then it hit Amazon Prime and some of the other video on demand services at the end of 2020.
Hit with the strength of a comet.
Right? This movie came out of nowhere for me, to be honest with you. I had no idea what was going on. I didn't see any advertising around it, which is probably status quo for the 2020 pandemic.
Yeah, obviously, I had no idea it actually hit theaters anywhere. I thought it was one of the kind of... Is it an Amazon original then? Or is it picked up by Amazon?
That I couldn't tell you. I'm really not sure. It could go either way.
Yeah, we should probably do some research on that. But I did see ads for it pop up, I think, on YouTube.
Yes.
Before a bunch of videos. But it wasn't... Like you said, it wasn't a huge movie on my radar or anything like that, especially in 2020. I only heard about it really a couple months ago. I think starting in January or something, it started to pop up as ads.
100%. And to be honest with you, disaster movies aren't generally on my radar either, right?
Well, it's a genre that really kind of saw its heyday, I think, back in the 90s, and maybe it faded out around the early 2000s. Well, really, yeah. I guess going back, I think the 70s, it was a huge
yes.
influx of disaster movies. You think about stuff like, obviously, Towering Inferno, Airport, and then all the sequels, and then...
Yeah, Poseidon Adventure,
and all the sequels, which was kind of cool. I was just thinking about this actually. Poseidon Adventure and then Poseidon Adventure 2, which was really like a sidequel and not a sequel, because the events were taking place concurrently with the events of the first film. Yeah, if you've never seen it, it's kind of neat to check it out and go back on this, because the first one, Poseidon Adventure, is a giant wave capsizes this luxury cruiser, and there's a group of passengers trying to escape. And then the second one starts off, it's this crew of salvagers, and they come across the wreck of the ship, and they're like, I don't know if it's real maritime law or like movie maritime law, but it's like, like scavenger rights. And so they send this crew in, it's like, we're going to scavenge some parts to sell later on. But I think they come across some people and they try to help them out, but it's like, it's happening concurrently. It's a really interesting concept that it would be like, today people would be like, whoa, it's a sidequel, it's happening at the same time. But back then it was just like, this is just an idea to make some more money off this movie that did well at one point.
All those 70s disaster films are a definite blind spot in my film history, although I think the Towering Inferno and Poseidon Adventure specifically, I've seen in bits and pieces of it on television over the years, sort of piece it together. But definitely some quality films to go back and check out sometime. In the 80s, we didn't really get a lot of disaster films, I don't think, and it really came about in the 90s. What do you think got it going in the 90s there?
Well, I mean, if you look at typical analyses of this kind of things and these kind of trends, it usually has to do with real world social, political instabilities and issues and anxieties at the time. But if you look at, specifically, you look at like Cold War era stuff with obviously Doctor Strange and like end of the world, like kind of nuclear fears and that kind of thing. But then in the 90s, we had... I think there was it was a sci-fi kind of revival where you had stuff like Independence Day, where it was like alien invasions, which obviously has influence from the 50s and all the kind of alien invasion movies at that time. Obviously there's literally like hundreds and thousands. You can get those box sets of like, all the B movie sci-fi movies back in the day. Like alien invasion was a huge thing. And then of course, as our technology expanded and we were looking out into space, and this idea of some kind of astral body hitting us, or kind of cosmic body or cosmic debris like asteroids or meteors or comets hitting us. And you had obviously the two main ones I'm thinking of growing up with were Armageddon and Deep Impact.
Yes.
Armageddon, I think, obviously the bigger one with Michael Bay, but I think Deep Impact probably arguably the the better movie? I know you would argue that, Brian.
Deep Impact and Armageddon, that is definitely a worthy conversation, and pretty wildly different now when I go back on it. But having come out like pretty like in the same release window, I guess, I'm assuming it's the same year those two movies came out. Really hit. I mean, we're both in high school. These are movies you're gonna go out with all your friends to see. They really got the disaster movie motivation going there. I don't have a proper word for it there, but I was thinking Independence Day for me was kind of the introduction of disaster films into my movie going habits.
Yeah, speaking of kind of movie doubles, then you also had Dante's Peak and was it Volcano also come out around the same time. I would argue that Dante's Peak was the better film, but both,
yeah, without a question.
Yeah, but the idea of natural disasters, that's been a common anxiety since the beginning of time, I think, for human beings.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at, I think there was, what was it called, Pompeii? Was that starring, was it Kit Harington in there, or was that somebody else I'm thinking of?
No, that's exactly it.
Okay, I haven't actually seen the movie, but that was another, obviously, volcano-related natural disaster flick.
Yeah. You don't need to see that movie, by the way. You're fine.
That's kind of, from the reviews, I was not rushing to see it, which is why it's still on my list. Also, obviously, another awesome one from the 90s, Twister.
Yes, that was great.
Which is like, whether you classify that as maybe a hybrid of disaster / action adventure, maybe, but it's about natural forces wreaking havoc on human civilization, so I think that would qualify.
Yeah, it's interesting. There was definitely two diverging things there. You have the sort of the sci-fi disaster alien invasion, which I was probably more involved in, but the late 90s with the natural disasters, we hit everything, culminating in the perfect storm in the year 2000 to end out the decade.
Perfect storm, 'cause the core was early 2000s, right?
The core. Now, is that the one where the Earth's core literally stops?
Yeah, and they have
rotating or something.
They have to take their land submarine down to the core.
You know what? I've seen that movie once, and I don't know. I think I got wrapped up the advertising of that, of how absolutely ridiculous it was. The core came out in 2003, and I wouldn't be surprised if that is where we sort of reach the beginning of the super disaster, like the supernatural disasters, not ghostly disasters, but before then, natural disasters were fairly localized, like Twister. Well, you're talking about a stretch of land with a couple tornadoes, even something sci-fi disaster like Independence Day. You're talking about specific cities all over the world, and they sort of branch out from there. But the core amped it up to the global level, and I think we saw a lot of that, and that's where I really got fatigued with it, and probably culminated in the movie 2012, which I believe came out in 2009.
Yeah, there's 2012, which was not as bad as I'd been led to believe. Not a great film. Amazing visuals. I think that was Roland Emmerich as well, right? 2012, because he was all about the disaster movies for a while. Because he did Independence Day, and then it was The Day After Tomorrow, which is another like solid movie, but didn't reach the heights of Independence Day for me. Maybe it's partially nostalgia because Independence Day just came out at that time. I was a kid and it was readily available, and we probably watched that movie, dozens or hundreds of times.
Yeah, exactly.
It was one of those movies you just watched over and over again. You wore out the tape, right?
No, I do remember The Day After Tomorrow revisiting that movie a few times. It was pretty decent. I think it had some good characters, and it was interesting and different enough from the normal disaster movies we were watching. And there was good because, it's only half the planet sort of that gets, if that's in danger. Everyone's got to move down south towards the equator to avoid this disaster. Where something like the core, the planet stops not twisting. The planet stops turning, and that's the end of the planet. And 2012, I watched 2012 for the first time about a month or two ago, and I was not looking forward to it. I kind of felt like it was just going to be way too over the top, and it wasn't super awful, but it definitely represented everything that is cliche about disaster films and super destruction, all this stuff. It wasn't great, but it wasn't super bad either. And at the very least, it was full of crazy special effects of ridiculous disaster.
Yeah, I think a lot of the genre really went to an over-the-top kind of place, but I think there were some good movies in there. Like, I was just thinking about Deepwater Horizon.
Okay. Yeah, that would be a great example of a nice, kind of localized, but very significant and relevant disaster film.
Yeah, and it was one of those. It was a man-made disaster. I really love that movie, specifically because there was a lot of like corporate kind of capitalistic malfeasance, but there was no real bad guy. It wasn't trying to villainize anybody, and I think it did a good job. I think at the end of the movie, it actually went through and paid its respects to the actual characters or the actual people that the characters were based on. Actually,
that's right.
Actually went through and showed them all. It was done in a really, really tasteful way. Same with the movie called Everest, which I saw recently, which was a lot better than I was expecting, which chronicled the ill-fated, again, true story adventure of a group of people who went to climb Mount Everest, and several of them either died or were severely disfigured from frostbite and gangrene.
That was a solid film, and I think you sort of hit the nail on the head there. Over the past 10 years, we've seen a lot more personal stories in disaster films instead of the over-the-top, like almost comic disaster.
Well, I think that's really what made Geostorm. Geostorm's another one. The reason I'm thinking of Geostorm is specifically because good? I haven't seen it yet, but it's also starred Gerard Butler.
Yes.
Right? I have not seen Geostorm yet. It's on my list. I'm going to have to go check it out. But I think the reason that Greenland, for me, really landed so well, and for me, I really enjoyed the film, was specifically because it went back and it grounded the story in the perspective of these characters that you could identify with, which we really think about the movies we've been talking about, something like Independence Day or even Armageddon, which I like the movie, but it's not a cinematic masterpiece. But you can follow along with Armageddon and Independence Day and Deep Impact because it's these big, like in some cases, world-altering disasters are being shown from the point of view of the people on the ground and how it's affecting their personal relationships and their personal lives, and showing the personal struggles to survive in these circumstances.
And those ones, all from the 90s, there really exemplify that character-driven disaster film, where I think you kind of lose a bit of that going later on. You got the core and 2012 on my mind here. And 2012 especially, where the characters are more caricatures of normal people. They're not necessarily behaving normally, and the situations they're in are just way too unrealistic. Where something like Armageddon, a group of miners going up into space sounds ridiculous, but these guys can sell it because they are actual interesting characters with some good backstory and relatability.
Right. For Armageddon, you have that willing suspension of disbelief. Completely ridiculous plot, as Ben Affleck hilariously points out in the commentary tracks. But it's because these characters are all given the time to interact with each other, and you see that these are people. They're not in-depth characters like other movies, but they're given enough backstory that you can actually care about these people. And when Bruce Willis takes Ben Affleck's place to blow up the nuke, and you feel the tears welling up.
Yeah, a really emotional roller coaster those ones.
But yeah, or even stuff like Twister, right? Twister it was less about, like, there was a whole plot of them trying to figure out a new way to have an early detection system. But really it was about, obviously, the relationship between, the late, great Bill Paxton's character and Helen Hunt's character, but also all the side characters. Like, you look at Dusty. I'm blanking on his name right now. He also
Philip Seymour
Hoffman, who also sadly passed away far too soon. But like, that Dusty character is like, you were given just enough, but you cared about these people, right? Like, you saw how the disaster affected these people on a personal level, on an emotional level, and that was what kept you invested. Not just giant and, dare I say, awesome special effects, but like you're saying, 2012, that movie, the characters, the one-dimensional characters, take a backseat, not even to the plot, but just to the special effects and the explosions and all the wild stuff going on screen.
Yeah, it's pretty fair to say that disaster movies are probably born out of box office motivations. They are popcorn films right from the beginning. They're meant to be experienced on the big screen. Like you're all the way back to the 70s, the Poseidon Adventure, where you have these gigantic sets being turned around and whatnot. Like these are spectacle films. Later on, we just basically lose the human connection there in something like 2012, where it's literally just 2.5 hours of CGI simulations of building destruction and water physics and whatnot. You're watching that stuff, you kind of forget that there's people involved, which is kind of unfortunate. Where I'm thinking of Twister, where we're watching a CGI Twister through here. It's going through someone's house, but we have enough human connection here to worry about the people inside.
Absolutely. You contrast something like 2012 or The Day After Tomorrow with, something like one we haven't mentioned yet, which is Apollo 13. Maybe even I would put it up there with either the best or certainly one of the best disaster movies ever made, by the still living and great Ron Howard.
Yep.
The thing that really tied that together wasn't the special effects. It wasn't the big explosions. It was the people and the plight of the people in that situation and their relationships and that emotional struggle and how they dealt with it, right?
The special effects drive the plot and support the characters,
exactly,
instead of being the main draw for the film.
Which I think you're right. A lot of the modern disaster flicks, partially as a result of the over-reliance on CGI, is like it's like a showcase. It's like a special effects showcase. It's like they're putting together a sizzle reel to say, like, look how big we can make this explosion. Look at how we can make this tectonic plate crack.
Yep.
Super realistically with awesome physics. Well, what about the characters and the plot? It's like, yeah, sure, whatever.
I think the CGI aspect really opened up the door for these usual disaster elements to invade our other films. And I'm just thinking back, maybe this is a bit oblique, but you have something like Man of Steel or Star Trek. What's the second one? Into Darkness?
Into Darkness, yep.
Where one of the ships is basically crashing into the city of San Francisco and absolutely leveling the city. And it's just full of glory shots of the buildings collapsing. It's just like, what are we watching out of a Star Trek film at this point that the climax is like this?
Well, I think you're hitting on a very interesting point, because I was talking before about how social and political situations influence our cultural texts, like films. And like that imagery you're talking about is very, very, like, it's tied to like the post 9/11, right? Very, very post 9/11 style imagery, where you have like a spaceship crashing into buildings is an obvious analog for airplanes crashing into buildings and those kind of things. So like that imagery of like, or like even in Man of Steel, when you have those two people crash into that building and this building starts collapsing, it's very, very, considering that it was made in the United States, you get that very, very post 9/11 kind of imagery. So it all ties back to that idea of reflecting the anxieties at the time, right? Same as you look at one genre that you could probably tie into the disaster flicks is the whole zombie genre.
100%.
I mean, you look at essentially like the post-apocalyptic. But the thing is about zombies, it's not post-apocalyptic per se. Usually it's like mid-apocalyptic, you could say. Where you look at the classic ones by George A. Romero, where it's just like, it's just a disaster or apocalypse like in motion. And you're there as it's happening. And then you see all these anxieties back in the day of, communism and the Red Threat. I think there were obviously themes of racism, which, while still relevant today, obviously, I mean, back in, you look at the 60s and that time of social change, so you can really see that how the art that we produce and the society and the culture at the time really are in dialogue with each other in what we would consider like just a popcorn action summer flick, but they're actually there's a deeper connection to the zeitgeist of the time, right?
I think you've touched on a lot of good topics there. I'm just thinking classifying, zombie and supernatural films as disaster films, because they are absolute disasters, right? And obviously very popular in the past couple decades here. I think the Walking Dead TV series is still going on, just to show it just keeps going and going. But we have a lot of horror movies that are like that, and a lot of the religious angle as well. What I think are classified as end of days movies.
Yeah, you look at literally, the Left Behind movie was inspired by a series of Christian novels talking about the end of days, and specifically an event called the Rapture, where all of God's chosen people are magically disappeared and sent straight to heaven, and the rest of the people are left to kind of struggle and figure out where they belong, good and evil.
Now, did you see the Nicolas Cage 2014 Left Behind film?
I have not. It's on my list.
No, me neither.
I think I was going through Nicolas Cage films, and I watched Knowing and Next.
Knowing is a great example of the end of days
Again,
scenario.
Absolutely. Knowing was it was a disaster movie. It was literally like the world was coming to an end.
I've always been fascinated with the Left Behind, the Rapture storyline, where literally people are taken away, they just disappear. And if you haven't seen it, I would definitely check out the Leftovers TV series, where I believe it was either half or 2/3 of people on the planet just like vanish. And it's 2 or 3 seasons of dealing with grief and loss on a really nice emotional story there. It was really good.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out. I'm kind of on the fence about Damon Lindelof right now, so I know I was letting some of my biases kind of turn me off, but from everything I've heard, it's a great show, and I'll have to check it out sometime. Yeah, I mean, literally also End of Days, I think, is the title of the Schwarzenegger film.
Yes.
I'm going to get in trouble for this probably from Brian here, but I still haven't seen End of Days yet.
You know what? You're forgiven, because I watched that when it came out, and I couldn't tell you anything about the film.
I think at that time it was kind of the downward slope of the first chapter of Arnold Schwarzenegger's career, where he was like this action titan, really action icon, but he was one of the action movie gods from the 80s and the 90s, and I think the early 2000s kind of petered out a bit before he went into politics, and then he got back into movies, and he started making, there was obviously action movies. He obviously starred in those Terminator sequels.
Well, the great thing about Arnold's return to cinema is that he came back and played his range, and he was playing in smaller movies. I think I'm probably botching the name here, Last Man, where he's playing a sheriff in a town.
The Last Stand, yeah, thank you. Which
is good action, and he's playing somebody that he should be playing. And keeping with a disaster theme here, we've got a movie like Maggie, which is kind of in that mid-disaster, mid-apocalypse kind of zombie film genre as well. And he's playing a character that he is in his range, and it ends up being a really good film.
Well, I was going to say, before you so rudely interrupted, that in addition to the mindless kind of action that he was doing, he was also, I think in the second phase of his career here, he was also exploring some more character-driven stuff like Maggie, which if you haven't seen Maggie, it's disaster movie, zombie movie. Arnold Schwarzenegger, for anybody who argues that Arnold Schwarzenegger can't act, I would point them to Maggie. Just like if anybody argued that Sylvester Stallone can't act, I would point them either to the first Rocky, which was amazing acting there.
For sure.
And then Copland, if you haven't seen it, amazing performance by Sly Stallone. We're getting a bit off the rails, but like I know that Schwarzenegger and Stallone, obviously, they're criticized a lot for their inability to actually act, but these guys can act. They've been in the business long. They can emote. They can act. Actually, they have a range of acting capabilities I don't think people give them credit for.
Sure. Well, I think they almost get typecast, or they basically become a product of the movies that they're in. And you're talking about the late 80s, early 90s. Acting didn't matter in action films. That's not what their purpose was, right? And I think those guys, because they were good action stars, they could do it, and they didn't need to act. Nobody asked them to act in those films, really. And now we've sort of moved beyond a lot of that stuff. And you mentioned sort of the decline in the Schwarzenegger films, End of Days. You could probably say The Sixth Day as well. I'm probably missing a couple other ones there.
The Eraser was not super great.
Yeah, stuff like that. And I think that was more, not necessarily a reflection on Schwarzenegger films or him as an actor or character. It's a changing of the action film genre in the industry, in our world. Those
late or early 2000 Schwarzenegger films, they really felt like almost imitations of the early 80s to 90s action films, right? Where you had like they looked at the tropes and they looked at, oh, these are the ingredients you put in to make a great action film, without actually thinking about how to combine those ingredients properly and, like cook and like throw it in the oven and cook it at 375. It was underbaked or overbaked or whatever cooking analogy you want. It was an imitation rather than the real thing.
It came out a disaster in the end. And by some strange extension, they are their own disaster films.
Nice segue. Or summation, I guess.
Yeah. So, obviously, in the past couple of years, there's been a few disaster films I've checked out. Geostorm, San Andreas with The Rock.
That's the one I was trying to think of.
And now we have Gerard Butler is almost our face for these disaster films, maybe just because of Geostorm, perhaps a couple other films in there somewhere I'm not thinking of.
Gerard Butler has been doing, I think he's one of those actors that he's gotten to a place in his career where he just feels comfortable like taking the roles that he wants to take, and he doesn't really care what people think. Like he reminds me in that way a lot of Matthew McConaughey. Or Matthew McConaughey for a while in his career there, where he was doing like mostly the chick flicks and the romantic comedies, right? And people were like, you're all these terrible movies. And it's like, I get paid really well. I get to hang out in great locations around the world with people I like.
Yeah.
And it's tons of fun. And he'd already, like, Matthew McConaughey was weird because he went through this phase where early in his career he was doing like quote unquote serious acting, and then he went through that phase where he was doing mostly rom-coms, which in the industry and society at large is looked at as a lesser genre. And then we had like the McConaissance, where he became this highly acclaimed actor who was taking on all these interesting roles, and it just feels like he consciously made these decisions. Like he got comfortable enough, he made enough money on these rom-coms, got comfortable enough, and he's like, well, now I can take these risks and do these other challenging movies. And it feels kind of like that for Gerard Butler's way as well, even though I think people don't tend to look at Gerard Butler as a great actor for whatever reason. But he started off like obviously with 300 and with some other action movies, got into this mid-career phase of doing a bunch of rom-coms, and
he seems to be really hitting on sort of your more run-of-the-mill, I don't know how to describe it, sort of your mediocre action films. And I'm probably being unfair in saying this, but he was in The Olympus Has Fallen, and then there was London Has Fallen, and I think there's a third one or even a fourth one. I personally haven't seen any of them, but that really ramped him up to become a fairly modern action star for, like, these are neat, consumable films that he doesn't have to be fantastic, but he's given it his all in it anyways.
I think that was almost kind of part of Gerard Butler's kind of renaissance, where he kind of came back from doing all the rom-coms and came back and essentially established himself as one of the modern action stars now, where he like you said, he was doing the Olympus Has Fallen series, and then he did a bunch of stuff like Machine Gun Preacher, things like Law Abiding Citizen, which I think at the time wasn't well received, but now you look online, it's got a fairly huge cult following. I think people really respected that after, like, upon further reflection. I think, what was the one, was it called Gamer, where he was like a character which was not, I haven't seen it yet. I've heard the reviews were not quite that welcoming, but I think he was also in stuff like I need to shout out like Rock and Rolla.
Yes.
All around amazing Guy Ritchie film, but Gerard Butler was in that. But in this one specifically, in Greenland, Gerard Butler shows why he is a movie star and why he is still getting roles, and why he's still in the forefront of our minds and our conversation. This guy, despite what some people online say, this guy can act. I've always liked him. And maybe I'm biased because he's in a couple of films I really, really enjoy. Like 300 is one of my all-time favorite films. But like, I've always really enjoyed Gerard Butler's work. Whenever I see him in a movie, that's always a plus for me. I was like, I want to see this movie because this dude's in it.
And Greenland really is a perfect vehicle for Gerard Butler. This was a surprisingly good film. I went in with low expectations.
As did I.
Yeah, it was pretty rough. I mean, so this is Greenland. Falls into the disaster category, obviously easily, but it also touches on natural disasters and the end of days genre that we were talking about, where a comet is passing by Earth. It's going to be very, very close to Earth, and chunks of the comet are going to come off. Scientists are telling people that some of the chunks are going to hit the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean. Things are going to be okay. And that's kind of where our film picks up. Is Gerard Butler is playing John Garrity. So he's a civil engineer, I guess, working in the construction industry. He's attempting to get back together with his wife. And one of the things I like about this film is it doesn't fall into the same trope as, a separated couple who come back together because of the disaster. It starts off with them coming back together. They are already working on a plan, like he's moving back in to his wife's home. His wife is played by, I'm probably going to butcher this name, Morena Baccarin.
I always mess it up too.
Yeah. They both do an awesome job, and they have a son. I don't know who the actor is. His name is Nathan, though.
Yeah, that's the other thing, too, is it's always interesting when you have a character in a movie that shares your name, especially in this one where they're constantly yelling it out. They're like, Nathan! And it's like, I don't know if this happens to people whose names are in movies more often, more common names, but it was interesting, yeah.
So basically the film has Gerard Butler moving back in with his wife, and in the background, there's lots of little news bits, and the story basically plays out in newscasts. Like in the background at first is that this comet is coming, his kid is excited, and probably in the first 10, 15 minutes, the emergency alert goes off on everyone's phone. This comet is going to not hit the ocean like it was planned to. And at that point, Gerard Butler's character receives a phone call, like an automated phone call from the U.S. government, saying that him and his family have been chosen to basically bunker down. They are literally going to head to Greenland, where they built these underground bunkers. I don't know if it's a lottery system that was going on, but most likely he was chosen because of his civil engineering background as someone who would be able to help post-apocalypse in rebuilding their society. And that's basically where their film really starts rolling.
Yeah, I believe that it's implied that essentially they were, like you said, they were essentially grabbing people who were going to be useful post-apocalypse to rebuild society. So as a civil engineer, obviously, helping to build buildings. But we're assuming that there's going to be doctors and other people like that.
Yeah.
I think one person specifically that he meets later on, his mother was a doctor and she got the call. Mm-hmm. So I think the implication is that essentially the government just decided, it's like, they did their analysis, like, we're going to need this many architects, we're going to need this many doctors, we're going to need this many electricians, we're going to need this many nuclear physicists, and there's like, and then selected what they thought were the best ones. Yeah.
But one thing the government did not want are people with sicknesses or disabilities, because they essentially the family gets to the cargo plane on the military base, and they catch wind that his son is diabetic and will require medication. They basically just turn him away right there. It's like, we are not going to be dealing with this for however long we're going to be bunkered up for.
Well, what I liked about Greenland, or one of the things I liked about Greenland, was that it presented these very difficult moral choices without preaching at us. Like when Gerard Butler and Morena Baccarin and like their family are driving off, other families, because they were having a barbecue at the time, so other families in the neighborhood knew that they got the call to go to this airport to get loaded on the plane, and nobody else got the call, and they were freaking out. And one person runs out and is like, take my daughter with you, please save her. And they're like, literally, and they're torn, right? Like, do we try and save this kid? And Gerard Butler's character, what was his name again? John?
John.
Yeah, Gerard Butler's character, John, he's obviously torn, but he's like, we can't take her with us. They're not going to let her through, and it's better for her to spend her last time that she has with her family, if it's going to be her last time. And obviously it's a very difficult decision. But then again, you look at things from on a higher level from the government standpoint, and it's a matter of resource management, right? Where it's like, we can't take people, unfortunately, if you have like cancer, or if you have severe asthma, which the kid had, if you have these severe chronic conditions, we're just not going to have the resources and infrastructure in place to be able to support you. Like, we have to think long-term survival on a level of a species as opposed to the level of individuals. And obviously there's cases to be made on both sides of that argument, but the movie presents it to us, but it doesn't like moralize. It doesn't preach to us.
Yeah, which is really nice. The perspective of the film is always from the Garrity family. And there are no scenes that were transported to the president's office or anything. We're not getting into the decision-making process from any government officials. It's all from their perspective, right? And I think that makes a very grounded film and hints at those bigger moral dilemmas, but doesn't throw it in your face.
Well, even like the military people working at these bases where they're gathering up these people to transport them off to the secret bunker. At one point, Morena Baccarin's character is pleading with these military people, please, let my son on the plane with us, let us go. Mm-hmm. And the military person explains to her, is like, we're doing all this stuff, but like most of the people here, 99% of people here, we're not chosen either. Like we're doing this, and we're trying to work within the structure, but we're gonna die here too, just so you're aware. And she doesn't come off like angry at this lady, but she's just like kind of trying to contextualize things for her and like put things in perspective. It's like, you're not the only one here. Like everybody here is trying to do a job so that our species survives, but like most people here are sacrificing their lives to try and help all these other people, and unfortunately they have to balance out those greater needs versus the needs of the individual. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. Spock was right again.
Definitely. That whole setup was really fantastic.
But yeah, it was smart of them to ground it in that kind of family drama, which drives it. At one point, the family gets separated. The mom and the child get separated from John, and they know that they're gonna go and meet up at North at her father's place. So that's they're leaving notes around because obviously with all the cosmic interference, cell phones are not working the best. They work sporadically as the plot needs them to.
Well, so it was at probably this point in the film that I thought maybe things are still a little ridiculous. Like my expectations were still low, where they are about to board the plane. His kid's meds fall out of a bag in the car, so the meds are in the car at this point. Gerard Butler realizes this, says, okay, wait 15 minutes, I'm going to run back to the car, I'm going to give these medications, and that basically gets, the government, the military officials overhearing that, oh, this kid requires medications, we have to send him back. So they become separated at that point. Gerard Butler goes back to the military base while his wife and child have been evicted off already. And he's on a plane. He could be absolutely safe. Gets off the plane to go see his family again, and it basically becomes it's the two of them, it's the three of them trying to get back together and navigating all the insanity that a world is that knows where a bunch of people know that they are going to die soon. It's pretty grim.
Yeah, so they're trying to navigate through all that chaos, and obviously the conflict that comes with some people being selected for survival and some people not, which is represented through they have a specific bracelet,
wristband.
The wristband they put on that you usually use to get into bars or raves. Yes. This one gets you to the secret bunker that will save you from the end of the world. But that happens for Gerard Butler's character. He somehow ends up on this transport with a bunch of other people. Obviously, the imagery is very evocative of the U.S.-Mexico border of immigrants and refugees coming across the border, and there's a great scene there. Also, obviously topical, where somebody calls out Gerard Butler speaking with his Scottish accent, unapologetically this time.
That's right. It's great. Please do more of that. Thanks.
Yeah, and somebody calls him out. It's like, oh, where were you born? And just this subtle thing about the whole, just touching on the racial tensions at the time, at our time here in history, without moralizing, without preaching to us, but just like it was built into the plot where this guy is like, see, this other person that's being transported sees the wristband, is like, dude, I'm taking that wristband. I'm going to be safe. And they get into this big fight. And the great thing about the fight is that Gerard Butler is not some crazy action hero. He's an architect. He's a civil engineer. And they get in this really messy fight that causes this truck, this van, to crash. It's this messy fight where they're on the ground rolling around. They're disoriented from the crash, and they're reaching for a hammer to try and get the upper hand, and he accidentally kills somebody. And even in this life and death struggle, he's absolutely horrified that he accidentally killed this person who was attacking him, who certainly would have killed him, right?
Yeah.
So again, there's like really emotional scene and having to deal with, life and death survival situation where it's literally kill or be killed, but then the emotional toll that takes of, even though you're killing in self-defense, you're still killing, and you still have to deal with the emotional weight of that as a regular human being.
It was a pretty powerful scene.
Yeah,
honestly, and those wristbands put giant targets on the family. I think does the child lose his wristband at one point, or
no? What happens is that the mother and the child, they think they're getting a friendly ride to go up north.
Yes.
But then they steal the mother's wristband and kick her out and keep the child with them.
That scene was gut-wrenching to watch. That one was really difficult because this poor woman is being overpowered by this man and his wife. The wife is just not doing anything. She kind of knows that this is their ticket, but she knows that this is really not the right thing to do. And so the husband is basically forcing Morena out of the car on the side of the highway and driving off with their child. It was really hard. It was at that point where I'm thinking, man, this movie is serious. And can they realistically, all three of them, meet up again? I really wasn't sure what was going to happen for the rest of that film.
Oh, they really raised the stakes there. On the one hand, that scene reminded me kind of Nocturnal Animals, where there's a scene on the highway which just like slowly escalates, where a man is being separated from his family. Different context, but same kind of vibe. But also, in terms of those people who did that to them, you kind of get the sense that the movie wasn't trying to turn them into villains. It was just regular people put in extraordinary circumstances and trying to weigh out these different moral issues about what they should do to survive. And they're like, we're going to take care of your kid as a way to kind of justify what they're doing to her.
Yeah.
Thankfully, in the movie universe, that kind of karma works out where those two people don't actually get on any planes. They're found out immediately because the kid finds the courage to speak out and scream out, "These aren't my parents."
This is a brilliant showcase of Greenland stepping above the other disaster films in its portrayal of this child and not doing dumb things. All the characters act pretty smartly. I think that I had some issues at the very beginning in how they got separated, but I'm fine with it. But here we have this tense situation where they're trying to get onto the plane, and the kid just basically yells out, "These aren't my parents," and essentially saves himself. We got a sympathetic military officer who is not going to let this kid be by himself. It's good.
Yeah.
The child is not a hindrance to them.
Yeah, well, the whole thing is like they're gonna get caught anyway because there's 3 people and 2 wristbands.
Yeah.
So like their whole plan is really born. You can see these are really desperate people, right? Mm-hmm. Well, you see the first airport, the first military base is actually at one point overrun. Like there's mobs of people around because they know it's like, oh, they saw these cars driving up there for all the selected people, and so all the non-selected people go up there, and eventually they overrun it, and it causes a big explosions and whatnot because this is a Hollywood movie. There's obviously there's a flame and there's a fuel truck, so obviously insanity ensues.
One of the planes literally blows up, like it's killing hundreds. There are some good special effects of this film, even though there's all this drama happening. But I do like that nobody really knows how the wristband system works. They know they have a wristband. People know that gets them onto planes, but you still have to verify who you are, right? And if you don't have a wristband, you just straight up, you can't talk your way into this situation. And it ends up being this couple's downfall. And a shout out to the husband who sort of kidnaps the Gerard's son, as was David Denham.
Yes.
Roy from The Office, who invariably shows up in films and ends up being the villain. for whatever reason, whatever lot he's received, that's what he's doing.
But I love that he just shows up and he's playing this role, and I think he's a very kind of gracious actor, where it's like he's not drawing attention to the fact that he's like a big name actor. It's like it was really great to have him in there and not be kind of drawn out of the film, right? Because he was doing such a great job.
No, it was really nice.
Yeah, so eventually everyone gets reunited at her father's place, where again they have this kind of heartfelt goodbye with I can't remember the actor's name, but he played Stick in the Daredevil series.
I want to call him Scott something, but Scott Glenn.
Yeah, so her father played by Scott Glenn, aka Stick from the Daredevil series. And obviously there's unresolved tensions there, coming from their separation, which is revealed was due to Gerard Butler having an affair with another woman. And so the father-in-law is understandably protective of his daughter, and so there's tension there. But then when it comes time to leave, the father or father-in-law decides to stay behind, because they figure out eventually that there's the secret base is in Greenland, which not everybody knew, because it wouldn't do much good if everybody knew where it was, and then they just started to pile on there. But that there were specifically out of Canada, Go Canada, there was an airport up there, and there were some private flights, and they were specifically chartering over to Greenland to try and get in that base, without the wristband, taking one last shot. So that's where they're headed. But the father-in-law is like, no, I was born here, I'm gonna die here. One of those kind of situations, which kind of felt a little bit tropey, but also it also kind of made sense in the context of the movie and the context of the characters, where he was kind of more down to earth and kind of grounded and rooted this place, and he was older and he'd lived his life and he was coming at things from a different perspective. But then there's a really emotional scene where the daughter and father saying goodbye for what they understand to be the last time, and it's not like overdone. It's not this big emotional thing where the music's blaring in the background. It's really kind of simple, and they're restrained, and like they know what's going on, but they're saying goodbye, but it's not over the top, award season kind of nonsense. And
this whole scene where they all meet up together, and there are some quiet moments where they're sort of getting a little bit of news on what's going on in the world. The writing is on the wall at this point. They know nobody's going to survive out here. I didn't know how long this movie was. When this whole scene plays out, we're 90 minutes in, and I'm thinking, okay, this is a pretty appropriate time. And this movie, it ramped it up with some high stakes drama, and I think it might just end right here, where the family is now together, and we're going to see them go out in peace. And I was instantly reminded of Lars von Trier's Melancholia.
Right.
And I'm thinking, oh, wow, I can't believe they're stepping into this kind of territory.
Well, it's also similar to Knowing.
Yes, 100%. And then they say their goodbyes, and they hit the road, and there's another half hour of pretty intense, trying to get onto the plane, trying to beat the clock. And it really, I think at that point, kind of falls into more of your tropey disaster film escape sequence.
Yeah, there was a lot more standard action beats. A couple things that did happen, though, that really were exploring the characters a bit more was, at one point, there's almost like a meteor shower coming down. They get stuck in traffic again.
Yes.
On the cars. And then a meteor shower starts, and then a bunch of cars kind of go off this path down to a covered bridge where they can go for cover. And then Gerard Butler's character, John, ends up saving somebody from a burning car, burning his own hand in the process, but just showing that everyone else was hiding, and he goes back and rushes in to help this person. I think one other person goes over to help as well. But there's little character beats like that keep it from feeling too stale, right? Even when they go to get on the plane, literally it's like, I think the last plane take, because there's a bunch of like kind of private chartered planes that take maybe like a couple dozen people, right? So not huge giant 747s, but literally it's like the last plane taking off, and they drive their car on the runway to stop it from taking off, and the pilot comes out and is like, dude, I'm at capacity, and he's like, and they're arguing back and forth, and obviously the pilot, again, that moral quandary, is like, he wants to help them, but like if he takes them on the plane, even 3 people on a plane that size can throw off the weight, and they might not get to their destination. They eventually do, because they're the heroes, obviously. They're the protagonists, so he lets them on. But there's still that, they work in those moral conundrums still, right?
And still keep it fairly tense. Like, you're not entirely sure how the situation is going to play out. Maybe they'll find another plane in a few minutes, sort of thing, right? But they get onto the plane. There's a sort of a quiet moment where they're flying towards Greenland. And, I mean, at that point, we're sort of hearing over the radio that, was it a 9-mile wide chunk of the comet is going to hit Europe and basically wipe it off the planet. And that is the extinction level event. And there's literally like a clock ticking down in the film to when this is going to happen. They hit Greenland. There's more disaster while little chunks of the comet basically force them into a crash landing, and they basically just squeak into the shelter, and they're in there.
Yeah, I think what they call it the planet killer, right? That
Planet, yes.
where essentially like a meteor or cosmic body that size hitting the Earth was essentially, I think they said it was about the same size as the dinosaur, the one that killed the dinosaurs, right?
Yeah.
So they know that, like, and it was obvious that the governments around the world knew this.
Yeah.
For some time, but they were trying to, again, just like in Deep Impact, they were trying to keep people from going into huge panic. Didn't quite work out that way, but yeah, I like it at that end scene where like they get to the plane and it runs out of fuel and they do the crash landing, and then they get over to the military base, and it's just like the military people see them, and it's like at that point it's like wristbands be damned. It's like we see some people out here. It's like
Everyone, yeah. If you made it to Greenland, you're coming in.
it was like I like that they didn't turn the military into bad guys again, which often happens in these movies where like military people are doing shady stuff. Is like, no, these soldiers are like, even though they had protocols to follow, they looked at those people and was like, no, this is just a real human moment. It's like they made it all this way. We can't ethically just leave these people out to die just because they don't have wristbands, and they get them all in there and save their lives.
Well, choosing to put the bunkers in Greenland is really smart. I mean, for the movie, and probably strategically as well for a real world situation, because it's difficult to get to Greenland, and if you don't know it's on this isolated island, how are you going to get there? Plane, boat, etc. So if the bunkers were somewhere, in middle America, you're going to have tens of millions of people show up to this thing. Here in Greenland, if you made it this far, come on into the bunker. We'll just make it work. Oh yeah, the military is still accepting, like still helping people out. They are feet away from being saved, but military people are still out there and they're going to die in a few moments. But they're doing everything they can to save whoever showed up.
Yeah, another great example of how Greenland really focuses on the disaster from like a human level and puts it into a human context. But it was still like, I was watching this and there were a couple sequences like that where I was like, my palms were sweating. I was getting nervous because, like you said, the movie did a good job, even though as moviegoers now we're aware of the standard kind of storytelling structures. But this movie did a great job of not calling attention to it and really kind of keeping audiences on the edge of their seat and not really knowing what was going to happen next. Like you said,
Definitely.
like there could have been a natural ending point where they were together as a family, and it's like we're gonna accept our fate and die as a family.
Yeah.
And that's the victory, the moral victory.
Well, that's the victory, right? That's why I really thought 90 Minutes in, they're at the father's house. It's like, this could be the end. So any time they have afterwards, if they die in the plane crash, if they die on the runway, at least they were together, and we know that was the victory, right? Those were the victory conditions, and they would have been happy together. I mean, we get an even happier ending on top of that because they make it into the bunker, and then I think we fast forward 9 or 10 months. They're able to open up the doors, and even, I'm not sure if this was during the end credits or playing over the credits, but they sort of are able to radio contact out to different settlements all over the world and find that, there are different bunkers. People have survived this. And there's your uplifting moment for humanity to continue.
I think with those sequences where it was implied, because it was all, I think there was like Russia and Japan or China, but there was bunkers, like they were all speaking different languages, but it made sense that all the world governments probably knew this was incoming and probably made preparations of their own. That was one thing I didn't quite... I know why they did that. I didn't like it as much. I like that sense of like them coming out of the bunker and they see the birds flying around, and that kind of that enough in itself, that kind of visual image was enough to know it's like, okay, life will go on, life survives.
Yeah.
I think
they could have faded to black.
Yeah, I think that the voices, the messages from the other bunkers was a little bit overkill for me. I didn't quite dig that as much, but it was still, I think it still worked as a, but I think they should have, like you said, I think they should have cut. They come out of the bunker, they see the birds flying around, and they have those like little survivor smiles on, and it's like,
yes,
boom.
The survivor smiles.
It's like, like looking off the horizon, hopefully looking towards the future.
And that would have been enough for the film. And they sort of kept going, and that's where I'm sort of looking at it afterwards. By all standards, this is a low budget film. I think it was $30 or $35 million. For that amount of money, it went far. And I feel as though they, obviously unverified, I feel like they must have had less money. They almost had an ending, and with some preview audiences or something, they're like, all right, here's another $10 million, go do a little more. And maybe some of this extra ending came out of that, where it's just like, oh, maybe we'll just react to some audiences wanting a little more positivity out of it. But really, it was kind of unnecessary.
Yeah, in fact, I would have even ended it when they were in the bunker, and then the asteroid was actually impacting, and they were feeling like the global shockwave, and they were just huddled together in the dark as a family. I would have been fine if they ended it right after that. Because
the family's together, right?
Family's together, and we know that they're underground, and there's already that hint that they're gonna like. This is like the seed for like the new age, the new age of humanity. We didn't even need to see the birds flying around. We didn't need to see them come out from that bunker. We didn't need to hear the messages from around the world. We did need to see, I think, because it was supposed to impact on mainland Europe. But then when they were showing the disaster shots, which is like the staple of a lot of disaster movies, like you got to show what the Statue of Liberty destroyed, Golden Gate Bridge has to be destroyed. Eiffel Tower has to be destroyed. Probably the pyramids and the Sphinx.
Pyramids got a chunk out of it.
They had to take it down. They did those kind of action, like those disaster glory shots. But then, like, Europe didn't seem like it was in too bad a shape. Like, you could still make
Europe
out the
gone.
Eiffel Tower.
It was a crater.
No, they were showing like the Eiffel Tower was still like you could make it out. There were still buildings and stuff in Europe.
I'll have to go back and rewatch some of it. I remember when they were zooming out, like showing the whole globe, and there was a huge crater where Europe basically was. I thought it was like Australia or something they were showing at some point.
I could be completely wrong. I highly doubt it though, but
I love the confidence. It's good.
No, it's entirely possible I'm wrong, but I seem to remember there was some kind of iconic European landmark they were showing. Or there were still buildings being standing. They were crumbled, but they were still there. Like how?
Well, that was the surprising part. There were still buildings everywhere, and you're looking at this and you're like, man, we could roll right into some post-apocalyptic movie now. Like this is a perfect setup.
Now it's Mad Max, baby.
100%, yeah.
Which now that I'm thinking about it, I think Gerard Butler would be great in a Mad Max film.
Oh my God, yeah, that would be great.
But yeah, overall, so I think we went through. So some of the stuff that I really liked was obviously the human connection, the human element, the human point of view, where it's telling this big global disaster story, but bringing it down to a personal level. Obviously, the acting was great. The two leads, Gerard Butler and Morena Baccarin, are great as always. These are really reliable A-list act. I consider them A-list. I don't know if Hollywood does, but I would have them in my movie if I were making a movie for sure.
100%, yeah.
Obviously, the special effects were good. The story, the plotting was good. On the other side, like a few things that were lacking. I think the ending was kind of, they got into like Lord of the Rings syndrome with the ending, where they didn't quite know where to end it. Like you said, a couple of the plot points were maybe a bit of a stretch. Like even like I know it works in the movie, but like the odds of like being separated from your kid and then finding them again in that kind of situation, like that, I think to me was a little bit stretching the suspension of disbelief. Didn't quite snap it, but there were some.
No, the movie sold it well.
Yeah, it sold it well. There were a couple plot points that were kind of iffy, like I think you pointed out, but I was able to I was willing to accept that because the rest of the movie was so good. I wish we would have gotten maybe just a little bit more backstory with the family before things started. Yeah, maybe a little bit more interaction with the neighborhood, a little bit more with his at his job, just to show like why he was chosen out of like hundreds of thousands. There's like probably tens of thousands of civil engineers out there, so maybe a little bit to show like why was this guy selected.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because when the very first scene is basically him working on site. I really don't know what he's doing. He could be a site supervisor. I don't know that he's a civil engineer or architect until after I read about it. So they're basically, the movie's showing us that he's working late, and his buddies are saying you should go home, and of course that's a hint at his home life is not that great right now, but they definitely could have spent more time and really amped up that scene. So the the family and the neighbors are having a barbecue when that's when they get the notification on the phone saying, you've been chosen, and it comes up on the guy's TV to show all his neighbors. And it's like, if we had more connection with the neighbors to show that they are betrayed, but maybe they also kind of understand the panic that sets in, it would have been more impactful.
Yeah, I'm not saying we need a whole 30 minutes or something in there, but just like a couple minutes here and there just to flesh out the characters and the relationships just a tiny bit more, and just to show, like, why is Gerard Butler going to be the one who leads the new human race?
Do they mention lottery at some point where it is kind of a bit of a lottery, and it's like,
no.
If he's a civil engineer, maybe there's, hundreds of thousands of them, and he got a lottery of however many.
Smartly, the movie doesn't go too in depth into the structure. It just tells you the basics of, okay, there's a disaster coming, and we're obviously trying to get people to rebuild a society afterwards. People are going to be most essential, but it doesn't say whether he was selected specifically or whether it was by lottery. You're correct.
Yeah.
But I think we're operating on different assumptions. So maybe that's why maybe the movie needed to clarify a bit more, because that's an interesting scenario, right? And I wish they would have played with that, explored that a bit more, where people were like, exploring the morality of that, and like somebody's like, well, why was he chosen and why was this? And then somebody else comes over, is like, honey, like, we have to think about the survival of our race, and like, he has this skill, and like, I'm a manager at a grocery store. I'm not going to be useful in the right. Like, no disrespect to the grocery store workers.
And I think it would be interesting too, because the government is doing all this. They're deciding. They don't know how good you are at your job, really. They know you have a job title. They have that, and they would put you into a pool of everyone with the same job title, expecting you could do similar work and pull a bunch of people out of that job pool, I would think.
Yeah, I would suspect if I were doing it, I would kind of have my staff put together essentially resumes on all these people, and I would kind of go through and just have a basic criteria and kind of sort through. I mean, who knows? You could be pulling the jerk on the construction site that nobody likes, or
100%.
But yeah, it's a risk you have to take in that kind of survival situation.
So that's what the one main thing I really liked about this movie. The positives for me was the perspective. It's always from the family's perspective. We don't get any crazy, higher up military or government officials. The newscasts through television or radio were done really well to sort of give the viewer information on what's going on. And as a result, going back to the barbecue scene with the neighbors, is we see the first impact into, I think it was Miami, Florida, and the destruction. And that's sort of a chance to showcase some special effects, but it doesn't actually transport us over into that area. Other comet strikes are from a far off distance. If our character is on the highway somewhere, we see the sky light up in the distance, right? And I think that kind of element and the human drama that goes on here sets this above a lot of other recent disaster films for me. There were a few iffy moments. The initial separation was kind of rough. We talked about the military base at the beginning being overrun. I didn't feel like the crowd was big enough. I didn't feel like...
Yeah, I felt like it kind of happened because I was like, oh, we need an action beat here. Let's have them overrun the base and blow some planes.
Yeah, like he's able to leave through that crowd and come back through that crowd without really much difficulty. And that stuff is fine. The movie didn't have me until probably 20 or 30 minutes in. And then it really amped it up, and I took it a lot more seriously. And I saw, like, I appreciated it for what it was and what it was doing. The last half hour of the movie felt like a bit of an add-on, but I think we sort of talked about it where they kept adding on to it a little bit here and there. They had many chances to end it before, and I would have been satisfied with either one of them. So really, a pretty solid film. I think it had some competent directing. The special effects were nice, and I wouldn't be surprised if they were able to go back with some added budget to spruce up those special effects. But because of the perspective, I don't think they needed a lot of it. A lot of special effects. They didn't have to go above and beyond into 2012 territory. Yeah. And I'm thankful that they don't. This is almost a low-key disaster film. So it was really solid. And at the end, I was thinking to myself, I would watch this movie again. This movie wasn't a 5-star film for me. It wasn't even 4 stars. But if I'm going to revisit a disaster film, it's probably going to be this one first. What kind of rating do you give this film?
I believe I ended up giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
Which for me, when I go 3.5, that's above average. Not exceptional. Like 4 stars are getting into like really great, and 5 stars is obviously awesome. But 3.5, I was like, this is a movie. Like if I saw this, I would pick it up on Blu-ray.
And that's another question there. Do you buy this movie? And I typically never buy disaster movies, although it depends on your definition of disaster. I mean, Independence Day I bought I don't know how many times, but for me that's more of a sci-fi alien invasion. Godzilla is another one where that could be a disaster film, right? The whole series are disaster films.
I was gonna say, I was surprised you didn't bring up Godzilla. I know you love that series.
You know what? I'm awful with Godzilla because I loved it when I was a kid, and I have not been keeping on top of my Godzilla. I've watched a couple of new ones like Shin Godzilla, but I have not gone back to the old ones and watched them. Although I did purchase the Criterion Collection, which I think has 15 Godzilla films in it, and I really need to get on top of watching that soon.
Yeah, you do.
So I would give Greenland 3, maybe 3.5. I gave it 3 initially, and I think it's probably my own hang-ups that would result in that upon rewatch, which will probably happen in a year or two. I could see easily 3.5.
So would you recommend people check out Greenland, Brian?
100%, yeah. If you're going to check out anything, any disaster movie right now, then give Greenland a watch and give it a chance.
I too would recommend Greenland, both the movie and the location, the country, I guess. I heard it's beautiful up there. If you get a chance up there, if you get a chance to go up there, it's on my list. I'm definitely going to check out Greenland.
And that concludes the 3rd episode of the Reel Film Chronicles podcast. We want to thank everyone for listening. The feedback we've received so far has been really great, and honestly, really appreciate all of you checking the show out. If you want to reach out to us with any comments or suggestions, maybe films to cover, you can email us at reelfilmchronicles@outlook.com, or check out our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/reelfilmchronicles, and of course, our website, reelfilmchronicles.com. I'm beginning to sense a bit of a pattern there. Until next time, stay safe out there, and we will talk to you soon.